Another great episode of Severance this week, and it took a big step at the end of the episode I was not expecting to get to this early in the series. Mark makes a huge decision that he's going to reintegrate in order to find his wife. And I'm really happy that we're moving along with the story. And yet the rest of the episode plants a lot of seeds and gets deeper into some mysteries, but we don't necessarily get a lot of answers. But that's what I love about this show. We get a big thing at the end, we get a lot of little things along the way, and it's setting up a beautiful rest of the season. One thing I wanted to start with is this scene with Miss Cobell here where she's making a big decision. She has driven away from Lumen, she doesn't want to accept their offer, and she's going to somewhere. She's going to Salt's Neck. It is 238 miles away. Very remote location, so remote that she sleeps on the side of the road instead of trying to find a hotel or something. It's a very, very remote location, and it's something of great significance to her because in the seat next to her, we see this object here. This is something that was significant enough to her that it is in her kind of shrine that she has to Egan, which shows that there's like this occult-like religious significance to this item. It's like part of her origin story. We see the name Cobell on there, and I'm guessing maybe that's her mother or some, I would assume her mother, I think is the best guess, but some family member that is significant to her, enough that she's keeping this hospital bracelet, and I'm assuming that that means this person was not long for this world, and this person's death was very significant and kind of led her on the path that she's on now. And I think this ties in with what happens when she turns around and goes back to Lumen. It feels like this Salt's Neck thing is a final destination. Like, she's not going to be going back from this. It's a point of no return. And yet she goes back to Lumen, she changes her mind, gets very emotional when she sees the sign, and she goes back to see Helena, and they're restarting their negotiations, and she's like, no, I want to be on the severed floor, I want to finish Cold Harbor, whatever that means, bringing that up again with Mark. She's there to finish the job, but they don't want that. And there's a very significant line, I think, here, where Helena says, you underestimate your blessings. And that was in response to Mrs. Cobell saying, I wasn't just born into this, I had to earn everything. And to me, this lines up with Mark's wife's disappearance / death, where that was so key to his origin story that it was the whole reason why he's in Lumen in the first place, why he wanted to be severed. It seems to be why he's significant to Lumen, why he's so essential to this work, to this Cold Harbor thing, whatever that is. That, to me, shows that Harmony had the same thing happen to her. Maybe this hospital bracelet thing that's so significant, it's in her shrine, she's carrying it with her to whatever Salt's Neck is. I think that that means that whatever happened to Charlotte Cobell was orchestrated by Lumen. It seems to me that maybe she was born into it because it wasn't all her own choice that led to that moment. So that's what I'm thinking based on this. And this scene ends in a very cagey way where, you know, they're supposedly about to talk to the board, which I'm not even convinced that they exist. And they're going into the building, and then Harmony stops, and I think she gets the vibe. Maybe she's going to end up in somebody's trunk and never see the light of day again, and she runs away. So I think that that's a very significant scene, and I'm really curious what all of you think about it. And just want to do a quick plug. I will be on a live stream discussing this season so far of Severance on Scarlet Fever's channel. I will link it in the description and pin comment down below, so I hope to see you guys there. And then we get Mark's side of the episode. He's trying to find out how to get a message to his innie. They had this light rigged up so that they could have a reverse message on his eyeballs, so when he closes his eyes in the elevator, he would see that message when the innie shows up. They don't even think about how to receive a message back from the innie. That's how desperate they are to find this out. And I think that that's a brilliant plan. It's something, and I like his line where he's like, how is he going to get the message back? Well, that's his problem. He'll figure that out. So we learn that that's not going to work, and they kind of speed run past this part of the storyline. It almost kind of feels like this part wasn't really essential. It was more just to show how desperate Mark was to find this information. You know, he was hesitant last episode, and now he's like, maybe she is alive, and that's what happened with Miss Cobell at the end of last episode, showed that there is some there. So he has to know now, and that's how desperate they are. And then we get the thing at the end of the episode where Dr. Asal shows up again. She's the one who makes them severed to begin with, and she's been working on reintegration. So that's what they're working on at the end of this episode, and it seems to work because the two versions of Mark are kind of flashing in and out, and we wake up on the table hearing Petey's voice, I'm assuming, through the speaker, and I just think it's absolutely brilliant that they filmed that both ways and how they cut back and forth between all of these things. So I'm probably most intrigued to see what happens with that part of the episode, and if the reintegration ends up working. It kind of feels like that's the beginning of the end of the show, if that really does happen, but that's why I just assumed it was going to happen way later, but it makes perfect sense for the character. So any Mark is just as desperate to find out what happened to Gemma, and there's going around everywhere to try to ask other departments if they know where she is. And here we get the separation with Dylan, where Dylan is motivated to meet his family because that's all he cares about in this moment. Remember, he's the guy who was incentivized by the finger traps and the waffle dinners or whatever. Those were very important to his character. Now he doesn't care about that because he knows he has a family, and that's all he cares about is seeing them again. And now Lumen has the brilliant manipulation tactic that they're going to use that as the incentive to end all incentives. So it has driven a wedge between him and the rest of the group, and he's no longer interested in trying to find out what happened to Gemma and what's going on in Lumen overall. He just wants to earn that particular privilege. He even tells, his very good friend Irving, who last episode or 2 episodes ago, he convinced to stay here, to stay alive. That to me shows he's kind of on Team Lumen now, which creates this wedge and conflict between them. And I think that that's really intriguing. Here we got a scene with Helly and Mark, and we kind of have a will they, won't they thing going on, where you think they're going to kiss for a second and then they don't. There's this hesitancy there, but they still have this attraction to each other. The hesitancy is, of course, because Mark's wife is still alive, even though any Mark doesn't know his wife, right, other than as the wellness person. So there's that conflict there. And here we got a scene with Milchick, and he has been dealing with his own identity crisis because he's now elevated to a new position, and he had this computer that had Mrs. Cobell's name on it still. And he had this conflict, like, who am I if, Mrs. Cobell is replaceable, even though she was so dedicated to the cause, and now he is in her position. He's trying to figure out what his life means, even though he's been so dedicated to this cause as well. And they are kind of doing the paintings manipulation. They have this whole origin story of the founder, and they make Kier look like Milchick. They have all these different famous paintings of different stages of his life, and they make it look like Milchick. And at the end of this episode, at the end of all these episodes, they have like a little interview with the directors and the writers, and Ben Stiller was talking about this scene, and he mentioned that there's like a racial element to this as well.
We explore what it is to be a person of color at Lumen.
And there's a conversation we often have about representation in media and stuff like that. We have this conversation a lot when like they race swap a character that's established. To me, it shows in this scene that Milchick kind of detects that there's like this phoniness to it, right? He sees the story of Kier, the founder, but with his face plastered on, it doesn't seem real because that's not him, right? So there is this kind of like stilted corporate depersonalization to it. They couldn't even let it be special to him because they're trying to show you're appreciated, we care about you, but they can't even go the whole scene without the board telling him through Natalie that, oh yeah, I got one of these too. So you're special, but you're not that special, right? So there's definitely this dehumanizing thing to this gesture. And it seems to be something that he kind of rejects. He ends up stowing the paintings away in storage by the end of the episode. So he doesn't seem to really be receiving this well. And Natalie just gives me the creeps, even though Milchek also gives me the creeps, because they have this fake kind of happiness, this forced kind of faceless corporate, not real human emotion going on. They're smiling too much, they're pretending to be nice when they're really not, and they have these sinister motivations. But in this scene, we kind of actually end up feeling for Milchek more, even though he's been playing that role to the other characters. We're kind of in his shoes, like this uncertainty and seeking meaning in his life, right? I think that's what he's doing here. And it seems like Natalie, in her eyes, like even though she's overly happy and jubilant, as she said, she's using this language that just does not sound personal at all, you know, and you hear, oh, the board is jubilant to see you, even though they don't say anything ever, so it's like they're not even real people. So there's all these layers to it, but in her eyes, like she's like, we're being listened to. You can't actually be your genuine self at any given moment. And it seems like in her eyes, she kind of knows how weird this is. And she's putting on this happy face because they are being watched, like I said. So really, really interesting scene. And then we get a fun scene with the goats. And we have a whole new department that have their own culture. And they're very cagey. And they're dirty. And they're very weird. And they seem to have, in the same way that Bert's department had a story about how MDR and their department were like at war at one point, and they had the same kind of story for the MDR guys. So they want to keep these departments separate, so they seem to plant these stories. And they asked to see their bellies and see if they have pouches, and that to me seems just sowing seeds of distrust of other groups. So these people knew Gemma, aka Ms. Casey, and she did wellness things with them as well. And Mark seems to get through to them by making it like, first they came for Ms. Casey and nobody spoke up, and then they're gonna come for you, right? So I think that that was effective to say like, hey, we're all innies, we're all on the same team here, kind of an us versus them narrative, trying to break through the barriers between the different departments and say, hey, it's really us versus them, you know, like the system itself. In the same way that the book he read by his brother-in-law Rickon kind of had this narrative to it that it's not you that needs to change, it's the system, which is generally speaking pretty bad advice because you can't really improve yourself by improving the system. Not that there aren't systemic issues, but if you're concerned with being the best version of yourself, you can't just blame the outside world for your problems. And so I find it interesting that the scene here shows that Natalie and Lumen are interested in propagandizing Rickon's book because it had such a significant impact on Mark and the rest of the group. They want to take this book and they say tweak a couple things. I hear censorship. I hear plant their own narrative. So they want to take this book that is something that Mark trusts and they want to plant seeds in there that are going to lead him to do what they want. So they're kind of trying to deprogram what Rickon said. So I think it's funny, like Rickon's book, it was really trite and corny, and like I said, kind of bad advice in general. But now it's this tool that Lumen can use. They want to take everything that's a disadvantage to them and make it an advantage and use it against the people. So they're very, very manipulative. So here we got the visitation scene with Dylan and Dylan's Audi's wife, right? And at first, I don't think we'd seen Dylan's wife in person before this, so I was like, is that really his wife? But it's confirmed later on that it is. And there's some sort of like purity to this scene where we see Dylan in a much different light, because the innie Dylan has been he's very confident, he's too cool for school, he's constantly joking around and teasing people. And now we see him very vulnerable, awkward, not sure what to do with himself. And it's a scene where you really kind of humanize him and feel for him. And it kind of feels sad when you hear his life story that he has had trouble keeping a job and they really need any Dylan to do what he needs to do for their kids. So I thought it was a really touching scene, as awkward as it was. And then here we got a scene with Irving. Felicia and Irving are reminiscing about Bert, and then we see what Felicia calls the export hallway. And this is where we saw Gemma going down, and the name kind of implies export. Things aren't coming back, they're leaving forever. So there's something sinister about it. The fact it's so dark and it's a red arrow pointing down. It kind of has a finality to it, right? Like a final destination yet again. And they used to go down there. Felicia used to go down there, but not anymore. Somebody is tasked with doing that journey themselves, but she still remembers where it is, and that's what we're going to find out next episode. And here's where we go through the looking glass, and we have Dr. Asal here, and she somehow found Mark, which to me implies that she's having him watched, or she has a tracker on his car waiting for him to go somewhere remote so that she can come talk to him. So she convinces him to go through with reintegration by telling him that Gemma is alive, basically giving him the information. He had this whole elaborate plan to try to get, and then it's just kind of given to him. And then we start to see the two personalities coming together, and that's where we end the episode. So wow, what an ending. Really excited to see where we go. Let me know your guys' theories in the comment section below. I think one theory we can rule out is that Gemma is a clone. I think we can rule that one out now, because we have it confirmed by Dr. Asal here that she is still alive. So that to me kind of implies that it's the same person and not just a regrown person. So I'm really excited to see where we go with the rest of the season. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section. And with that, it's been your boy Shuggy. We'll see you guys in the next video. Thanks for watching, everybody. Peace out.